Greetings, Paul, and thanks for being on Guy Talk. I appreciate you coming on to share a little bit about your life and a couple of your adventures. This is Colonel Paul Burke. I knew him as Sergeant Burke years ago, and then he ended up getting a boo-boo and had to leave the teams and moved on to bigger and better things. So let me give you a little bit of history on Paul. Pretty complex guy, retired from the Army as an Army Aviator with 30 years of service combined with active National Guard and Army Reserve time. He entered the Special Forces in 1979, and I just learned in a previous conversation with Paul that he that where he lived, that they had a business where they were serving propane, and it was during the winter. Somebody got hurt. Paul stepped up to make sure that the fuel got through, and then we got out of school and then had to get a job and decided to become a Special Forces medic, believe it or not. After he got his boo-boo on a parachute jump, he went off to flight school, got his college education finished, went off to flight school, and retired a colonel. So I can only make fun of him half the time because on the Army, of the enlisted side, the officer side, I'm still calling him colonel. So, but also, Paul flew Apache attack helicopters, Cobras, I think, when he first started.
Yep.
And was also were you an EMT or a paramedic with the Baltimore County Fire?
I was a paramedic with a career service.
Right. It was a career service there. Did his time with the Baltimore County Fire Department. Retired as a shift commander, and at the end of it, he decided that he wanted to continue with his medicine, with the medical work, and trained as a physician's assistant, and now works as with a multi-state physician's assistants focused group that works entirely on emergency medicine. So, welcome to the show, Paul. I got to tell you, there's more information on this bio than there is on our talking points. So, but anyway, welcome to the show, and I'm glad that you took the invitation to entertain us with a little bit of your.
It's a pleasure to be with you. It's great to see an old friend who still looks so good, and having watched the other podcasts that you've had, man, it's such an honor to be here. You know, you had Daryl Davis and Pete Gary. Those guys are just. I'm honored to even be in the same conversation with folks like that. Just amazing people.
Well, we just had Lieutenant General Blum on right before you, and I said to him, I said, "Do you remember Paul Burke?" He says, "Oh yeah." And I said, "Well, he told me that that he was down there with a Cobra during Katrina, and I was like, well, what were you doing there with a Cobra? Was it security?" He said, "No, I had IR on there, and I could find bodies." And he was like, yeah, they were actually doing that. Yep.
Yeah, no, it actually wasn't me, but and it wasn't a Cobra. It was actually an Apache that they had out there.
They had the Apaches then.
Yep, they were looking their forward-looking infrared, and they were looking for survivors to rescue. Absolutely.
Okay, so you were in a position then to send others down there to look, because you were running that aviation unit then?
No, I was long retired by the time that Katrina came around. My involvement with Hurricane Katrina was that after I retired from the military and moved to Tennessee, I kind of missed flying. And so I got back into flying again, and I wound up buying an airplane. And during Katrina, I took the back seat out of my 4-seat Cessna 182, and I flew a bunch of the emergency relief missions in Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee.
That was Helena, right? That was Helena.
Yeah, Helena.
Okay. Yeah, you weren't involved with Katrina at all?
No, I was not involved with Katrina.
You were already retired then.
I retired from the military in 2009.
Okay.
And the fire department in 2011.
Wow.
I'm just that old.
I was ready to say I wouldn't have guessed that. And you know, when I was talking with General Blum, I saw in his bio he was born in '49. He's going to string me up for this, but he doesn't look his age either. So
No, he's an amazing guy.
So tell us a little more about I kind of like got into your area a little bit with how you got into SF, but tell us your story with it. How did you get into SF?
Yeah, so um, I was just starting college, and a family member had a family business delivering liquid propane to trailer parks in Maryland. And it was late fall, early winter, and he got sick, had appendicitis, had a ruptured appendix, had a big abscess in his abdomen, and he couldn't work. And so you got to support the business, got to support the family. And of course, all those homes needed hot water and heat and the ability to cook. So I delivered propane for about 3 months. And it was too late in the semester to drop courses or withdraw. So I have the distinct honor of saying that I failed every course that semester, every single one, because I couldn't drop out, I couldn't withdraw. And a guy that I was a volunteer fireman with at the time had an uncle, Major Dave Calloway. And I had lunch with him, and he looked like a poster. He was in starched jungle BDUs with this really amazing looking green beanie beret thing on his head. And he said, if you need a future and you're thinking about doing something and you're already an EMT and you're already trying, why don't you think about Special Forces? And I was like, never heard of it. We talked for a while and sounded like a challenge, and it sounded like something I'd be interested in. And he said, you're already in the medical field. You should be a Special Forces medic if you can hack it. So I'm always up for a challenge. And that's how I got into SF, was just Dave Calloway, and what an amazing man he was.
Yeah, that's great story. Great story. And God knows you can't have enough medics, especially ones that are competent. So how long did you spend in SF?
I got injured in the late summer, early fall of 1981 in a parachute jump. We were jumping the maneuverable parachutes. I don't even know if they have them anymore. The MC-1-1 Bravos.
Yeah,
and they give you a forward speed of like 6 knots. And we were jumping. The winds were much higher than forecast. The winds were like 12 to 15. So you're going backwards. And I got flipped over a pine tree and injured my back very badly. And one of the other guys was injured. And so I kind of worked on him, and out we went. And yeah, that was the beginning of the end of my parachuting career, and therefore my SF career.
And so you had to look for something else, or you wanted to look for something else, because by that time you made a commitment that you were staying in?
Absolutely. Yeah, I found the military to be much more than I had ever anticipated or hoped for. I enjoyed the people. I enjoyed the training. I enjoyed the lifestyle. I enjoyed the challenges. The military guys are the kind of people that you want to build your lifelong friends and careers around. Honest, patriotic, hardworking, just salt of the earth, patriotic Americans. And that's who I wanted to be around. And I didn't want to just say, okay, my back's hurt, I'm done. So I got healed up, finished my college education, and then had an opportunity to go to flight school, and went to flight school.
And it just like fell out of the air at you, or I mean, did somebody approach you or anything about it, or did you get out?
No, what happened was, because I was still not back on jump status, but I still had to maintain my military time. I was helping to teach at the Maryland Military Academy. And they like to use the SF guys to teach there, because rather than getting someone from the infantry to teach land nav, and then somebody from a communications unit to teach how to use the old ANPRC 74 and 77 radios, they get an SF guy to teach whatever. And I met a guy, another major at the time, he retired as a light colonel, Major Lucas. And he said, so what are you going to do now that you're not jumping anymore? I said, I'm not sure yet. I'm still looking at options and trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And he said, have you thought about flight school? And I said, not really. And he said, well, you probably ought to think about it, because I'm in an aviation unit and we have some openings and I could get you in. And as luck would have it, we spoke, and like 3 or 4 months later, I was at Fort Rucker, Alabama. ready to
You
go.
must have made an impression.
Either that, or it was just all of the stars aligned. It was very fortunate.
Yeah. Well, I think that probably had something to do with making an impression too, Paul. I got insider information. So, okay. So so you were in the Guard for how long? For how many years? 30 years?
I spent a total of 30 years, 22 days.
For the Army, for active
Everything
Guard. And
all together. Yep.
wow, that's great. And so tell us, I mean, right now we're going through like this renaissance with people wanting to get back in the military, maybe because of the leadership at the top. Explain what that commitment is, so people that see this might want to follow that path.
Are you referring to the time commitment like in the Guard and Reserve, or are you just
Yeah.
talking about the lifelong commitment?
Well, no, about the weekend commitment, the annual commitment, and then what it's done for you.
Okay. So as far as the annual commitment, obviously that varies from unit to unit, but the majority of my Guard experience from mid 1984, when I finished flight school, until I left aviation, you have the standard National Guard commitment of a weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer. But then in addition, as an aviator, there are flight requirements, a total number of flying hours per year. So in addition to your weekend and 2 weeks, they have these things called AFTPs, or additional flight training periods. And you get 48 of those a year. So just about every week, you're coming in and flying and continuing your training. Because you got to be on top of your game flying a helicopter. And if you're flying a lift helicopter like a Huey or nowadays a 60, you got to be really good at weight and balance and cargo manipulation and crew coordination and instrument flying and things of that nature. And if you're an attack guy, which is what I was, then you got to be comfortable with multiple weapon systems and means and methods and modes of engagement, et cetera, et cetera. It takes a lot of practice. So as an aviator, it was a weekly commitment. And if you're not an aviator, depending on the kind of unit you're in, anywhere from 2 weeks in the summer and a weekend a month to more. And of course, nowadays, folks that are getting in the military where you're active, you know what you're doing, Guard or Reserve. Back in the 80s, there was a question of, gee, maybe someday there might be a mobilization of some kind. Mm-hmm. But nowadays, if you're getting into the Guard or Reserve nowadays, it's probably not a matter of if you and your unit will be mobilized. It's a matter of when. So you need to have your affairs in order. You need to be prepared to serve in whatever capacity, and you need to know, and your family needs to know, that it is more likely than not that at some point you're going to be called to active duty for service for the nation.
I was just talking with General Blum, and he said that when we started to integrate Guard and Reserve units into the active component, that he was like the catalyst for that. Actually, that he spoke with Rumsfeld about that, and said that that he would take it apart and rebuild it this way. And Rumsfeld bought onto it, and wow, did it turn out?
Yeah, it was amazing, and I think part of it was the cross-pollination, because a large number of folks that are in the Guard or Reserve are prior active duty. So they had a wealth of experience that young active duty troops didn't have. And the other cross-pollination that occurred was the people with all these incredibly varied backgrounds. Okay, so I was a Cobra guy, but I was also a paramedic, and I was prior SF, and and there were other guys with similar backgrounds. And, right. One of the other pilots that I flew with was actually a minister. I mean, when you're talking about somebody who's having a bad day and you say, well, I got somebody you can talk to, I don't want to talk to another pilot. I know, let me introduce you to this guy. So the wealth and the breadth of experience that the Guard and Reserve was able to provide, I think, was unexpected and very welcome.
Well, when I got out the first time, I was looking for that same thing that you were talking about earlier, about that esprit de corps, that certain personality that you attach to while you're on any kind of service. And I was void of that. So I started searching, and I found that SF unit down in Maryland, and it was like, let's give it I'll do a burst of 1 year and see if I like it, And turned out that Bobby Bates came over and kicked me in the foot about a year later and said, "Hey, it's time for you to go re-enlist." And I said, "Well, I'll do a burst of 1." And he said, "No, you're doing 6. Get in there. The paperwork's already done." And which I was grateful for. I mean, I enjoyed it because the talent. You had Vietnam guys there. You had former active duty guys there, and the amount of talent and the proficiency. They might not have been able. They might not have been able to beat everybody, the youngsters, in a PT test at that time. But in a couple weeks, they probably could have been very competitive. I thought it was a great combination and a great balance. And I think something that a lot of people should consider, especially today, just something for people to consider, I guess, young people. I just talked to somebody recently. I was playing golf with my grandson, and his buddy said he's talking about going in the Coast Guard Reserve. And he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Do it. They got great, it's a great career. Do it. And it's a great retirement at the end."
Yeah, and even if you decide that you're going to leave military service in 6 or 8 or 10 years, a lot of your military service applies to civilian marketplace and to different federal and fire and local governmental jobs like the fire department. My military service applied towards my fire department retirement. At least part of it
Right.
did.
And it's about giving back to that community even more.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally get it. So let's talk a little bit about that full-time career of yours with the at the fire department. I mean, obviously that's what led you into this physician's assistant.
Yeah, pretty
And
much.
so you came in, you had your degree now. You went into
Yep.
the fire department, Baltimore County. That's a
Correct.
professional fire department. And I remember Roten always calling, saying that what did he call the volunteers? Which God bless him, you got to have them. But he had a kind of a condescending name for him way back when. But he so you have the professional fire department. How did you get into that? I know you were a volunteer.
Right. Well, I was a volunteer first in Howard County and then in Baltimore County at individual stations prior to the military while I was in college and stuff, just because I liked the emergency medicine stuff. Back then was when the TV show Emergency had first come out. A lot of people saw that and got excited. And then when I came back from flight school, I was already an EMT working on paramedic through the volunteer fire department. And the career department was hiring, and I was ready for a job. I was finished college, so I applied and got hired as a paramedic and firefighter paramedic, and it was the beginning of my second career, I guess, and loved every minute of that one too.
Sounds like a win-win, Paul. Sounds like a win-win.
Well, I was already a medic in the military, so
Yeah.
continuing service as a medic in the fire department only made sense. And then as that career progressed, I went medics in the field in the military are physician extenders, right?
Right.
And paramedics are really physician extenders. And physician assistant, or the newest, latest term, I believe, is physician associate. We are also physician extenders. So I just worked my way up the ladder as a physician extender from 1979 when I first got in to, well, this is my 31st year as a physician assistant.
Wow. Was that part of your career vision as you were going in the beginning, that you were going to go that way, or just worked out that way?
Absolutely not. But if you watch the news nowadays, you see the paramedics as they're preparing to transport someone. You see them push a button and the stretcher goes up. They push it over and it slides itself into the ambulance
Right.
for transportation. Back in the day, back when dirt was new and I had hair and your hair was not gray, we had to pick up all those stretchers and we had to carry all of those people. And that's a young man's game. And I
Yeah.
knew that I still wanted to continue in medicine, preferably emergency medicine, but I knew that my back would not tolerate continuing to do that year after year after year. So that's why I started looking at what has to happen next.
Is that injury that you received in that parachute jump, is that still an issue with you?
I'm wearing a lidocaine patch right now.
Well, well, did you self prescribe that?
No, the VA sends me a box of them about every other month.
Yeah. So hauling stretchers around and gurneys isn't for you anymore, or
No, sir,
probably
it
was
is
for a while.
not
Probably.
for quite some time. That is correct.
Right. Well, thank God for technology there, right?
Well,
So okay, you're going through your career. You started off as a paramedic, and then you started moving up that ladder, obviously. And you were a captain, I believe, too.
right. Yeah, I was one of the 4 EMS shift commanders. Our rank at that time was captain. Now they're a battalion chief equivalent. So, things have improved since I left. But yeah, I retired as a captain. There were 4 shifts. I was the C shift, the Charlie shift commander. I had 7 lieutenants that worked for me. And I forget the exact number, but there were about 25 career and 25 volunteer medic units that then worked for those lieutenants. And there's more of them now. There's more medic units, career and volunteer. But yeah, that's how it wound up.
I guess as the population grows, they have to add, and the organization gets bigger. So,
Exactly.
did you have any time like stepping on fires?
I was qualified, and I did it through the volunteers. But my career track in the fire department, I stayed in EMS just because I loved emergency medicine.
Yeah, that sounds like a great career path. Um, so you started to talk about Helena. Now, a little story before we have a family member that was living in Fort Myers.
Okay.
Uh, Left Fort Myers to go to Asheville to get away from hurricanes.
Okay.
2 months later, uh, 2 months later after they got in there, now um, the the wife was 7 months pregnant when they were moved in there, and 2 months later, the Hurricane Helena rolls through. So I had a little bit of skin in the game, and started like trying to figure out what the heck was going on up there.
Right.
And I saw you on, I think it was on Facebook or something, saying that you were flying stuff in there, and I contacted you about trying to get some help. You tell us what you saw and tell us what you experienced with that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw me on Facebook or if I was also on the news. They interviewed me briefly at one of the Charlotte news stations sitting in the aircraft. But it was absolutely amazing. There's an organization called Operation Airdrop, and they are based out of Texas. I don't know a whole lot about them, but it's primarily a volunteer organization that provides logistics support, communication support, kind of like a C3 cell,
Uh-huh.
um, for rescue and relief missions using aviation assets.
And these are civilian guys.
These are civilian guys. Many of them are prior service,
Yeah.
and they then coordinate to use other volunteers to assist in these relief missions. So they put something out, I think it was on Facebook, about anybody who is able to, who has an aircraft capable of carrying cargo, we could really use your help in Eastern Tennessee and Western North Carolina, because many of these towns are destroyed. The majority of the infrastructure was destroyed. Most of the roads, the roads are on the flat areas, right? Well, the flat areas are in the valleys, and that's where the rivers and creeks are. So they're gone. And airports are generally on higher ground and fairly level ground where you're not going to have a lot of runoff and washouts. So a lot of the airports were still operational.
Mm-hmm.
So I had time. I figured I'm going to help if I can. Why not? I took the back seat out of my aircraft I'm flying a Cessna 182, which is a 4-seat aircraft, and it has a maximum payload of about 1,000 pounds. So I took the back seat out, which gave me another 35 pounds. And then the general background was that Operation Airdrop coordinated so that one of the Walmarts in Charlotte, North Carolina, in Concord, North Carolina, agreed to allow one of their parking areas to be used to collect supplies. And then anyone and everyone could donate supplies, whether they were personally owned supplies or purchased and dropped off supplies, as long as there was unopened food, et cetera, et cetera. And then a moving company donated the use of their moving vans to transport all of these materials to the Concord Airport, where someone had donated the use of a large hangar. All of these goods are then broken down by type, dog food, cat food, diapers, water. And they are then put in boxes and taped up and marked with what they are and how much each box weighs. They then took these boxes and loaded them onto pallets so that you had weighed, palletized loads, which are ready to go. They then had a list of airports in the area, and then airplanes just started arriving with a big sign that you printed out before you came that just said Operation Airdrop, so they knew where to tell you to go and park. You parked, you walked up to the hangar, you introduced yourself. They found out if you were instrument rated, because you might have to fly in cloud or instrument conditions. They found out if you could fly fairly long distances with a load in the aircraft, and they found out how much weight you could carry. Then they assigned you an airport for your next mission. They picked up one of those palletized loads on the forklift and took it out to your airplane. And since the pilot...
Uh-oh. Are we losing?
Yeah.
There you are.
Okay. I can hear you. I just can't see you. Oh, there you are, you handsome devil.
There you are. I got you back now too.
Okay,
so,
sorry about that.
So you had a forklift come out and bring that load out
right
to the aircraft.
Yep. And then since the pilot in command is in charge of weight and balance, and where you have the heavier versus lighter things in the aircraft is important, then the pilot, in this case me, I was responsible for making sure that it was loaded correctly. And then I would fly out to these various airports, drop off supplies, come back for another load and do it again.
How many airports were involved?
Oh, a ton. Just the airports that I flew to, I wrote them down. The airports that I personally flew to included Statesville, Ashe County, Asheville, Gatlinburg, Hickory, Elk River, Pickens County, and the Greenville Airport. So, wow. And that's just the ones that I flew to. I mean, other people flew to other airports.
So this network just appeared from, I guess, former aeronautic experts came together and just put this together, or was this government driven?
This was not government driven. This is all private and entirely volunteer. And in addition to the level of organization that I just told you about, the other things that happened were they had a list of airports on the wall that you could say, these are the places I can go to. Some of those airports had provided a list of critical needs. So if you said, yeah, I can get to that airport, they would make a palletized load based on the critical needs for that specific airport instead of just grabbing one of the pallets and taking it to your aircraft. Then you show up to these airports and there is another long line of volunteers who are unloading your aircraft, assisting with refueling your aircraft, although you still got to pay for the fuel. Right. In Greenville, North Carolina, they unloaded the stuff right out of my aircraft, and it either went into a trailer to be moved and sorted, or it went onto four-wheelers where it was driven to the edge of town and then put on mule trains to get over the mountains. Wow. In Gatlinburg...
Are you talking four-legged mule trains?
Yes, sir. They used four-legged mule trains to get over some of the areas that were not passable by four-wheelers. That is correct.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. At the Gatlinburg airport, they took stuff right off of my aircraft and they took it right over and they put it into Robeson R-44s, helicopters, And they flew those into the mountains to the areas where there's no airport, but they could get into fields and deliver critical supplies. It was just an amazing effort by thousands of people to do, that it brought out the best in Americans. That's the best way I can say.
Like manna from heaven, right?
There you go.
Yeah, manna from heaven. So how long did that operation last? How long were you involved in it?
I flew for 6 days, either 2 or 3 missions a day for 6 days. And I think it went for a couple days longer than that as far as actual flying missions, and certainly went longer on the ramp up and then the cleanup and ramp down, returning equipment, supplies, and all.
So what did you do? Just lodge at the airport, or did they have hotel rooms, or were they gone too?
I flew home.
You flew home. Okay.
Yeah.
How far away was your home base from that Asheville area?
Flying about 45 to 50 minutes, depending on winds. So it wasn't a bad flight. So I would fly home. I'd refuel the aircraft, pre-flight it for the next day, put it away. Then the next day we'd pull it out, we'd hop in, we'd do it again. And when I say the Operation Airdrop strongly recommended that all of these operations be 2-pilot operations because it was incredibly congested airspace. But I didn't know that many pilots down here. And my wife is a great co-pilot. She's flown with me to Texas, California, Alaska. So she's been all over with it. She's really good at monitoring air traffic, monitoring radios, changing freaks. So my wife was my co-pilot for all of this.
Huh. Well, I mean, is she a licensed pilot too?
No, she's not. She's just smarter than I am.
Paul Burke trained, right?
There you go. Now she's really good at it. She's great. And so she helped with keeping traffic separate. And when I talk about how congested the traffic is, I don't know if you saw any of the pictures, but if you look, the only airport that I flew, well, the 2 airports that I flew into that had operating control towers were Asheville and Concord. And all of those other airports that I mentioned were uncontrolled airports, meaning there's no control tower. Okay. So then the only way.
Would you have to talk amongst the pilots there to see who was next in, who was next out?
Exactly. They have what's called a CTAF, or a Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. So you're going into this airport, you start calling about 10 miles out, letting them know you're coming. And then what would happen is the fixed wing traffic would come in, entering a standard traffic pattern, coming in and landing on the runway, taxiing over to the unload port, wherever we're going to be working. The rotary wing traffic, which are going in and out as well, because they're picking up supplies from that airport where we're dropping them off, and they're taking those supplies to areas where we can't go. Right. So we would fly in and land. We would fly in and land on the runway, and the rotary wing aircraft would come in perpendicular to the runway and wait for us to clear. Then they'd hop over and they'd load up or unload and head out. And there were no incidents. There were no accidents. The amount of air-to-air communication and coordination was amazing. That many people in that congested an airspace, no problems.
What kind of volume and rate of aircraft going in and out? I mean, it sounds like an amazing thing. There was no accidents, no incidences, and a lot of it was uncontrolled, just professional pilots all working amongst each other.
Yeah. Well, at Concord, sometimes there would be a line of 15 or 20 aircraft waiting to take off. There were that many aircraft flying missions. And it was just good pilots using good professional skills and professional judgment. And, or as they like to say, they used their professional judgment to avoid having to use their professional skills, But everything was safe, well coordinated, and very efficient. It was an amazing thing to participate in.
You sent me some photos of aerial photos of a riverbed.
Yes.
And in those photos, you saw rooftops. So we're talking now, the river raised how much in some of these areas?
Some of these areas were absolutely devastated. And it's interesting because if you read a little bit of history, this was clearly a 100-year storm. And what I mean by that is that almost exactly 100 years before that, a similar storm had come through Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee and did the same thing. Because where are the roads? The roads are in the flat spots. Where are the flat spots? The flat spots are in the valleys. Where do people live? They live in the flat spots. So the exact same thing happened like 100 years ago. But yeah, that picture I showed you, and that was day 2 or day 3, and that was just outside of Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge. And you can see the houses on one side, but then you see a little string of what looks like trees, and you look close. Those are houses in the river, underwater. It was impressive.
Yeah, it sounds. It sounds devastating for sure.
It absolutely was, and there were people missing for weeks after that.
Yeah. What was the government representation there? Was there like National Guard helicopters coming in, or regular Army? I know Fort Bragg was not that far from there. Was FEMA in there? I mean, was it all civilian, or was there government representation in there as well?
So I know that the North Carolina Army Guard was flying missions with their 60s because I saw them in action. I met some guys from the 18th Airborne Corps who were down from Fort Bragg in CH-47s. They, like a lot of other people, were waiting to receive taskings from FEMA. As of when I met those guys at Asheville, they had not flown any missions yet because they had received no taskings from FEMA. In the week that I was there flying ops, I never met, saw, communicated with, or heard any FEMA operations at all. FEMA was entirely absent during the time that I was flying missions.
And I've heard that from other sources as well, which kind of confirms, you got a couple sources saying that. It's kind of...
Yeah. So if they were there, they were in areas where I was not. Now, maybe that's because Concord was so busy, they tried to stay out of the way, and it was a very well-run, well-greased operation. And maybe it's because the airports that I was flying into were in the middle of devastation and there was no ground transportation available. I'm not sticking up for them, and I'm not condemning them. I can tell you, I never saw them once.
Yeah, just the observation. And maybe they thought if it's not broke, don't fix it. I mean, if it's running well, why get involved in it?
Because we're from the government, we're here to help.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot of experience with FEMA, but from everything I've been told, FEMA is basically a checkbook, and they go in there with the money. They start pushing money out to folks or to organizations to get things done. They're not an airlift like what you were talking about. They're more of the money that would like buy the fuel and the materials and the supplies and stuff like that. Maybe come in with tents, buy tents, put them up for people to stay. Not so much where they have people to build that and do that stuff. More just the check writing part of it. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, my understanding was after Katrina, they bought a bunch of house trailers for use. Now, I understand a lot of them never got used, but at any rate, I agree. I think that is primarily how they work. I don't know a whole lot about it anymore, but I never saw them in the week that I was there flying missions.
Huh. That's pretty interesting. So now you got 30 years in the military. You have a military family. The lineage is there.
Absolutely.
So tell me about your legacy. Tell me about how it's continuing.
Well, my son, my oldest son, in college, found that he was truly gifted in languages, and so he studied Russian. And he was thinking about what am I going to do with this, right? So we started talking, and I said, let's think about some military stuff. And we spoke with an Air Force recruiter, and we went in and we met with the recruiter, and he gave us a stack of papers that looked like a phone book, and he said, this is all the stuff that you need if you really want to think about flying. And Paul said, I don't have eyes for flying. I have corneal dysplasia. But I'm a Russian linguist, I think, because I'm studying Russian. I'm doing, oh, you want to be a linguist? It was like a 3-page packet. So he did well. He finished, he went through ROTC through the Air Force, and then he did a little over 10 years in the Air Force as an intelligence analyst and a Russian linguist.
Wow.
And my daughter, Kate, was interested in emergency medicine, but not sure exactly what she wanted to do. And we had a few conversations, and she became an Air Force medic. And then that helped to pay for her college education. And she is now, she's out of the service, and she's a physician assistant in orthopedic surgery.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so the Air Force had sent her to Alaska a couple times. And she said, when she got out, when she finished college, she said, I just loved Alaska. That's where I want to live. And she moved to Alaska to work as a PA and met her husband, who is also active duty Air Force. He's an Air Force.
We're 4 minutes away from the 3-minute warning, by the way.
I can hear voices now.
Okay. So your son-in-law or your daughter met her husband,
In
who
Alaska.
was an active duty Air Force guy. What does he do?
Air Force, SF is not what you and I do. SF is security forces. So he's an Air Force MP, essentially. So with that,
I think I ran from them a couple times, Paul. Leaving the club. I think it was leaving the club.
Yeah. So really, I got to enjoy the perfect trifecta. In 2012, I gave my son his oath of commissioning. I commissioned my son into the Air Force. Wow. And then in 2013, I gave my daughter her oath of enlistment. And then in 2022, in Alaska, under the northern lights at night, in front of a flag being held by my wife and daughter, I re-enlisted my son-in-law into the Air Force. So I have a commissioning, an enlistment, and a re-enlistment of my family members. It's the perfect trifecta for a military guy.
And the beat goes on, huh?
And the beat goes on. Yep. And they all did great, and they're continuing to serve, and they're all doing great. You know, it's just a wonderful legacy.
Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. And I thank you so much for coming on the show to share all this with us. You gave me a lot of information on, and gave us all some information on what happened with Alina. And again, I had skin in the game on that too. So I was kind of concerned, and now a little bit better informed of what happened. And just great to see you again. Hopefully, if you get down to the little latitudes down my way, maybe you'll let me know. Maybe we can link up.
Absolutely. And if you happen to be cruising north on I-81, I smoke some good brisket and ribs, brother.
Oh, now that's definitely a honeypot right there. Thank you so much, Paul, for
it was an
being
honor
on the show with us. Thank you so much.
Honor to speak with you.